Let's take a look at your market news now. Stock markets in Asia fluctuated throughout the day. China and the United States exchanged fresh tit-for-tat tariffs on billions of dollars worth of goods, while the two sides held talks on their long-running trade dispute. But investors aren't optimistic on a deal being reached. China also said the US was clearly suspected of violating World Trade Organization rules and that it would file a lawsuit with the group. Tokyo's Nikkei gained 0.2%, Hong Kong's Hang Seng dipped 0.5%, while Shanghai's composite index ticked up 0.4%, ending trade at 2,724. US stock indexes were mixed last night. The Nasdaq gained on the strength of tech stocks, while the S&P 500 was little changed as it marked its longest bull market run since World War II. The Dow Jones Industrial Average slipped 0.33%. The S&P 500 was mostly unmoved at 2,861, and the Nasdaq Composite Index added 0.4%. For more on the markets, we cross to Arabile Gomede at the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. Good afternoon, Arabile. Drama after Twitter today. We saw the rand falling about 1.8% at some point. What's happening now?
Yeah, well, it certainly has retraced some of those losses and even trading at around 14 Rand 22 odd against the US dollar. It is a much better mark, and perhaps people coming to their senses in some way or other and not believing that Donald Trump will perhaps act on any of the information he might be given by Senator Pompeo as well. So we'll see how that really moves on. Perhaps the market itself is saying, let's wait and see what happens. We're overreacting to this news. Of course, sanctions were a key issue there. But that and the market sitting in the green, it is a fourth day now that it seems to be sitting in the green when it comes to intraday trade. It's around 0.1% up at this point in time. But with that, let's unpack the rest of the local and European markets. Not enough with regards to the red tinge out of the US, but we saw some green out of Asia today, which perhaps influenced some parts of the market today here in South Africa. Owen Nkomo is joining me as well as we unpack the markets from Nkunzi Wealth as well. Owen, thank you so much for the time. I suppose the big story will become that rand story. Let's talk about that from the onset. 1440 odd, even past that mark, right through now to around 1421 against the US dollar. Do we know where this rand is going?
No, that's a big question. I think there's just so many things that are affecting the rand at the moment, local forces and foreign sources as well. But the bulk of the reasons that the rand is volatile at this stage come from outside the country, with Donald Trump being at the center of it. You know, we've spoken extensively about how all these trade wars with China and Turkey and the rest of the emerging markets, as well as some of the developed economies, with Donald Trump saying, put America first in everything we're doing. It's broadly expected in the markets that the currencies, especially emerging markets currencies, are going to continue to be volatile. And the rand is always is the most traded currency. It's easier for people to sell that currency when there's a perception that it's risk off in the emerging markets. People always sell the rand. And I think yesterday another surprise Donald Trump tweet leading from Twitter. There's President of America saying he wants to have a look at our expropriation of land without compensation, which we'll fully understand, but I don't expect America and Donald Trump and most certainly Secretary to understand. So at least they've said, go and have a look at what's going on here. And now we're sitting in a position where we just have to wait for them to decide whether or not this expropriation of land without compensation is fair to white South Africans.
Yeah.
But until then, the rand, in my view, will remain very volatile because Donald Trump is Donald Trump. He will do whatever he wants to do.
He could quite simply have just made a call to President Cyril Ramaphosa and said, what actually is going on with this? There's no need to tweet about it. There's no need perhaps to even send out Secretary Pompeo to say, well, make sure, what is that issue down there? Surely there's a way of getting even clarity from your ambassador who sits right here as well.
But this is Donald Trump.
It is, right? It certainly is, and he makes the market in whichever way he chooses. How do you then trade in a market like this?
No, look, it's very volatile. You need to be very careful. Keep small positions, diversify your currency base. Obviously, you realize that at this stage there's a very big, the volatility in the major markets currencies is very big. So you need to, if you're trading this basket of currencies, or if you're trading it for profit or for a bank or whatever, you need to balance out your portfolio such that you don't have too much exposure to the major markets. But if you call it right in these major markets where the currencies are in a downward trend against the dollar, you then make cash. I mean, I guess you don't have to trade currency if you can't stand this volatility.
Yeah. I was about
That's
to say
what we look
that
for, actually.
It's a tough market to be in.
No,
so
look,
you call it.
this is what we like. The volatility in the currency markets actually give us trading opportunities. So it's certainly not for the faint-hearted.
Finding those opportunities, though, how do you go about that process?
No, look, it's a combination of things. I mean, some guys would trade these currencies from a fundamental perspective, where they look at country's economy and decide that, look, Turkey is in a very tough spot. Russia is in a tough spot. Brazil is in a bad spot, but it's recovering. South Africa, there's no GDP growth coming through there, but we've been promised a lot of changes by the government. So you then factor all of those things and say, fundamentally, can the economy of this country change? Will this country get loaded with more debt onto their fiscus, or is it the opposite? And then you can make a fundamental call based on how that economy is doing. But on a short term, you obviously want to look at the trading indicators, use technical analysis to say this is the trend in which the currency pair is moving. I think that the rand is on a downward trend, I'm going to buy it, or you think it's oversold in the short term, it's now very cheap, then you can get involved. That's how the opportunities present themselves. But the people that I feel pity for are the guys who use currency to do their business, importers and exporters. They're in a very precarious position at this stage. It's tough to make decisions.
Certifying those contracts as well. At the same time, we also had equity news coming out. I mean, this morning, Woolworths, Massmart, those retailers, including ShopRite, which came out earlier this week, are certainly proxies for how the general state of the economy looks. And judging by the earnings of those two companies, it doesn't look good.
No, not at all. I mean, it started with the reports from ShopRite. So ShopRite 2 days ago getting sold off about 6 or 7%, because the market is looking now for alternatives in terms of food and some of these groceries. There's many alternatives now available, and people are generally pressed for budgets. So the retail stocks are struggling. We saw the numbers coming through from Massmart and from Woolworths as well. Not looking great. Woolworths double-digit declines, dividends declining by double digits as well, a big number. But I think the market has factored those in. And Massmart, only managing 1.9% increase in numbers. But on a like-for-like basis, you can see that these companies are struggling. Massmart is worse for them because in the 12 jurisdictions on the continent where they're operating, they experienced declines in performance. So the consumer is under pressure, not just in South Africa, but across the continent as well. And a big portion of that could be the fact that, the oil prices keep pushing higher, and that takes money out of people's pockets as well.
If you take a look at the top line numbers, which is revenue, small growths, 1.9%, 1.6% here and there. But the bottom line is where you see all of the damage sort of having been done as well. If you take a look at South Africa's growth methods as well, if I was to take a broad look, growth of hopefully 1% odd. But if you take a look at real growth, which perhaps would be the bottom line, you'd almost say that's also in double-digit negativity.
It's going to get tough.
It's that proxy, right?
Yeah. No, it will get tough. I mean, Arabile, I think that if you consider the fact that we were excited coming into the year, global agencies gave us a second chance, investors gave us a second, not a second, 10th chance really, to be honest.
Definitely.
They gave us a lot of chances to fix our house, and I'm not getting a sense that we're fixing it fast enough. We're still dwelling on the normal, on the normal things, like everything is okay, but it's not. And I throw back to Greece, who has had a tough past 4, 5, 6 years, and have come out of it. They've taken bold decisions as a country and said austerity will be applied, government will reduce the expenditure on the fiscus. They'll make sure that we're reducing our national expenditure. We're managing their debt. Yes, Greece still is overexposed in terms of debt to GDP, but I think we don't want to try and get our debt to exceed 60-odd%, 70% before we start getting very worried. We should be worried now. We should be talking aggressively.
Do we get austerity? Do we get austerity in South Africa?
I don't think we do. We don't get austerity. We don't know what it means. We think we do, but we don't want to press the button because we're trying to please too many people. And you cannot run a country
with an election next year. It's certainly going to be a difficult one to do also.
You cannot, Arabile. And I don't know that our economy has got 12 months to turn around. I think it's quite unfortunate. We need to be making the tough decisions, and we must put the country first instead of any party politics or company politics. Let's just put the country first and make the big calls and reduce our expenditure in any way possible.
Owen, appreciate your time, and bold moves, bold steps needed by government. Certainly stepping on the right toes is what South Africa needs to do, surely, to grow the economy. And perhaps the tough decisions need to be made now in order to grow us later. It is a green tinge for the JSE All Share and a better trading for the Rand, despite it being weak on the day as well.